I remember the sting. My nose started bleeding the second his fist landed on my face. My whole body ached the next day, sore and bruised, and I kept asking myself, how the hell was I supposed to show up to work on Monday? I made up a lie, told everyone I'd been in a car crash with my brother-in-law, said he slammed the brakes and I hit my head on the dashboard. That way I could at least walk into the school without people staring at me like I was damaged.
I was born late into my parents' lives, what they used to call a surprise baby. My brothers were already grown when I came into the world.
It was the early 1970s in Georgia, a different world entirely. My parents were conservative Baptist churchgoers, strict and old school. I was raised by them and by aging relatives, no cousins my age, no real friends, just school and church, and then church again at 17. I met the man who would become my husband. It was a Sunday afternoon after service. I came home, and he was sitting in our living room with his mother. She used to be neighbors with mine back in the day. He had just joined our church too. He was 10 years older than me, tall, athletic, handsome in a way that felt out of reach. He seemed mature, stable, like he saw me. That meant something when your whole life felt invisible. He kept coming around, visiting after Sunday service. Eventually, he asked to court me, the godly way. He said in our church, that meant getting approval, reading scripture together. No kissing, no going out, no dates, just prayer meetings, pizza nights at home, and holding hands at the front gate. My father liked him. My mother was neutral. My brothers weren't fans, but they stayed quiet. We married 2 years later. My parents built us a small house on their land near Marietta. It had a bedroom, kitchen, bathroom, modest but clean. My father sold the old Chevy truck he'd worked his whole life to buy just to afford it. My mother asked my husband to contribute a symbolic rent, just enough to help them recover the money they'd poured into our home. But he was furious. Exactly 1 month after our wedding, he shoved a wad of bills into my hand and hissed, "Here, go pay your mother." He said it with such venom that I spent that whole day crying, humiliated. It was the worst day I'd known at that point in my life. And it was only the beginning. He drove a taxi, but the car was co-owned with his brother. Everything in his life involved his family, his mother, his brother. I was never part of that equation. We lived in North Georgia. His family was across town on the east side, and every major decision went through them. Not me. When I got pregnant with our first son, things got even tenser. My mom reminded him about the rent he hadn't paid in months. I was still in the hospital, recovering from labor, when they had a screaming match in the street. I called home to let them know I'd been discharged, but by the time I got through, the damage had already been done. My mom picked me up alone. When we got home, the house was locked. He'd bought a chicken to make soup for me and left it alive in the bathroom. The place was a mess, dusty, neglected. He didn't allow my mother inside anymore. I had just had a C-section. I was 20. I didn't know anything, but I swept the house. He killed the chicken, made the soup, and somewhere between the broth and the bitterness, I realized something was deeply wrong. For weeks, my mom would only sneak into our house when he was gone. The moment she saw his car, she'd leave. The atmosphere was suffocating. He began looking for a new house, wanted us away from my parents. His family promised a loan. Meanwhile, I passed a teaching exam and landed a job at a public school in East Atlanta. That's where he said we were moving, so I chose a post close to the apartment he claimed to have found in Decatur. Then came that December afternoon. It was cloudy. My mother was visiting when he burst in. He demanded she leave. She refused. "This is my daughter's house too," she said, arms crossed. He started slamming cabinets, cursing. Then he screamed, "We're leaving now." My father had promised to help with the move, but he was on a long-haul drive and out of town. That didn't matter to him. My mother grabbed one arm. He grabbed the other. My baby, barely 2 weeks old, was in a crib next to us while I stood there, torn, literally and emotionally. "Don't go with him," my mom begged. "He's going to destroy you." But I was already bruised. He'd punched me in the arm days earlier, furious over something I'd said to an elderly neighbor. The purple was deep, ugly, and familiar. I asked my mom to wait outside. She did. He left. When he came back, he brought 2 vans, packed all our things, said his sister had bought the place. I didn't argue. I just climbed in. And that was the day I left everything behind. We moved into a modest apartment in Decatur, Georgia. 2 bedrooms, no yard, linoleum floors that curled up at the edges. But it was miles away from my family, exactly how he wanted it. He said it was temporary, just until we buy a house, he promised. My sister's helping with the down payment. But I knew the truth. This move wasn't about upgrading. It was about isolating me. I started my new job at the local elementary school. I loved teaching, loved seeing little eyes light up when they learned something new. But even that was tainted. Every single paycheck gone. I'd sign over the entire check to him. No questions asked. "I'm managing our finances," he said. "You don't need to worry about that." He handled all the shopping, all the bills. I didn't even know the price of milk. My world was home, work, and whatever crumbs of peace I could beg for in between. When our son was still a toddler, I got pregnant again. Our daughter was born 2 years later, and that's when things started to get even darker. He decided our son barely 4 should live with his mother during the day. "You can't handle both of them," he said. So every morning, he'd scoop up our little boy, drop him off at his mom's, and leave me home alone with the baby. That broke something in me. My bond with my son faded like an old photograph. He came home calling for daddy, never for me. I became the woman who fed him, bathed him. But I wasn't mommy anymore. I was just the help. When I finally went back to work, I hoped things might get better. They didn't. But at least our son was back in the house. Even then, he was distant, clung to his father like a shadow. It hurt. But I swallowed that pain, like I swallowed everything else, the violence. Though that kept getting worse. He started drinking. Not the casual Friday night beer. No, this was full-blown binge drinking. He'd disappear for hours, come back wasted, and find a reason, any reason, to hit me. Sometimes it was because I asked a question, other times because I didn't. I remember one night vividly. Our daughter was about 7 months old. We were invited to his brother's engagement party. Of course, the kids weren't allowed to come. His mother's housekeeper watched them. I got dressed, did my hair, tried to pretend I wasn't exhausted at the party. I saw him flirting, brazenly. He leaned in close to a young woman, his future sister-in-law's cousin. I think and I swear I saw him try to kiss her. My stomach turned. I confronted him, quietly. I didn't want to make a scene. He didn't care. His eyes darkened. His voice dropped. "You think you can embarrass me in front of my family?" he growled. We left the party. I barely got into the passenger seat before his fist connected with my ribs. The drive from Stone Mountain back to Decatur felt like a war zone. He beat me the entire way, one hand on the wheel, the other pounding my face. My nose bled again. My blouse was soaked. And the worst part, his family was driving right behind us. They saw everything, and they did nothing. I went to work the next day with sunglasses on and another lie ready. Car accident, I told them. It's fine. But it wasn't single quotes T. It was never fine. Every time he hit me, he'd come back the next day with an apology. Maybe a flower. Maybe dinner. Maybe just a soft tone. And I'd let him back in. Every single time until the day I didn't. It was New Year's Day. A quiet Sunday afternoon, about 5 p.m. in our tight little neighborhood east of Atlanta. The houses were packed in like shoeboxes. No front yards, just concrete steps and chain link fences. My parents had come over the night before to celebrate the new year. It was the first time in months they had visited, and we'd shared a small dinner, tried to pretend everything was normal. But normal didn't last in our home. By morning, he was already drunk, still writing the wave from New Year's Eve, slurring his words, shouting at the TV, spilling liquor across the kitchen counter. I knew what that meant. I'd seen that look too many times. Usually, he'd wait until the kids were asleep before hitting me, like clockwork. But not this time. I had already bathed the children, dressed them in soft pajamas. My daughter was 2, my son 4. I told them we were going to grandma's again, just to step out of that tension, escape it even for an hour. But my son didn't want to go. He clung to his father, who was passed out on a mattress in the living room. I want to stay with Daddy, he said, again and again. And I knew this was going to explode. He opened his eyes slowly, groggy, red-veined. What did you just say to him? He slurred, pulling himself up. I told him we're going out, I said carefully, my hands shaking. And that's when he did it. He slapped the couch, stood up fast, grabbed a sandal off the floor, and snapped his fingers. Get over here, he said, like I was a dog. I'd heard that voice too many times. I'd obeyed it too many times. But something snapped inside me. I grabbed the closest thing I could, an old, heavy pressure cooker from the kitchen. I gripped it like a shield and charged at him, screaming, swinging with everything I had. It hit his shoulder, then his chest. He stumbled back, stunned. I'd never fought back before. Never. He lunged toward me, ripped my dress down the front, scratched my arm, and yanked my hair hard enough to pull me to my knees. But then the kids started crying, both of them. Loud, panicked sobs. That made him pause. He took them by the hands and disappeared into the backyard, whispering fake promises of snacks and cartoons. I wiped the blood off my lip and ran, barefoot, hair tangled, dress torn. I ran into the street. Our street was filled with neighbors, visitors, cookouts. I didn't care. I needed someone to see me, to hear me. He followed, chased me down, grabbed my long hair, and dragged me back through the iron gate like some animal. I was 25, but I looked 50, tired, broken. But I wasn't done yet. While he was calming the kids inside, I climbed the back stairs to the second floor. We had a tiny attic room he never used. I unlocked the window, stepped onto the ledge, and jumped across the narrow alley to the neighbor's roof. I slipped, cut my hand, but managed to pull myself onto the other side. From there, I crawled across to more rooftops until I reached the home of a couple from our church. They were kind, older. They let me in immediately, hid me in their daughter's room, closed the blinds, locked the door. He was still outside, pacing the street with one child in each arm, shouting my name like he was the victim. That night, I gave the neighbors my mom's number. They called. My brother answered. Within 30 minutes, he was there. He pulled up, engine still running, got out, and asked one thing. Where is she? They led him to me. When he saw my bruises, my swollen face, torn dress, he wrapped his arms around me and didn't say a word. Then he turned, walked out, and found him. They fought. Right in the street, fists, blood, shouting. It wasn't pretty. But for the first time in my life, someone fought for me. My brother took me straight to his place. I didn't even know the couple whose house I just escaped into. I was dizzy, bleeding, exhausted, but I was out. I had made it out. For the next few days, I stayed at my brother's house, a modest home outside of Atlanta, in a neighborhood filled with kids' bikes, barking dogs, and working-class families just trying to get by. His wife made up the guest room for me and my baby girl. My son? He stayed behind. He didn't want to come with me. That broke me. He was too young to understand the abuse. All he knew was that Daddy made him laugh, brought him candy, told him Mommy was the reason things were bad. My own son refused to look at me when I showed up to pick him up. He clung to his father's pants and cried like I was a stranger. I had lost him. Still, I filed the police report. I went to the Women's Resource Center, got the medical exam. The doctor looked at my bruises and asked what I did for a living. I told him I was a public school teacher. He nodded and said, "That's why he beats you. You threaten his sense of control." Those words never left me at the time. Atlanta had one of the few women-focused precincts in the city, the Family Violence Unit near downtown. I was lucky. The officer assigned to me was a black woman in her 40s. She looked at me like I was human. That alone felt revolutionary. But the system, still slow, still flawed. And then came the church. A few days after I left, a man from the congregation called me. I recognized his voice. He was one of the elders, a deacon. "Your husband came to us," he said. "Said you ran off with the kids. That's not acceptable. Marriage is sacred." I held the phone tight. "Did he tell you what he did to me? That he beat me for years?" A pause. Then, "That's not grounds for divorce, sister. Not unless he cheated." I hung up shaking. My hands couldn't even press the buttons properly. I stared at the wall and wondered, is this really happening? And it was. That weekend, they called a church meeting. One of those reconciliation gatherings. He was there. I was there. My brother came with me. Thank God. He didn't trust them, and he didn't want me to be alone. I walked into a room of 12 men. Elders, ministers, deacons. Not one woman. My baby girl sat on my lap, pulling at my shirt for milk. I was still nursing, still recovering. I was tired and raw and half broken. And they judged me. They let him speak first. He told them I had emotional problems, that I was disrespectful, unstable. He said I was trying to tear apart a godly family. I told them the truth, that he hid me, that I had pictures, medical records, witness accounts. Their faces didn't change. One man said, "We understand, but you have children, a husband. You have to forgive and move forward." Move forward? As if I hadn't already walked barefoot through hell just to make it to that room. The meeting ended with a prayer for reconciliation. They told me to go home and try again. I walked out of that church feeling smaller than I had ever felt. Not even the house of God believed me. But I had my brother, and I had my daughter, and I had a spark inside me that would not go out no matter how many men tried to smother it. I spent 18 days at my brother's house. 18 days of silence, healing, and whispered conversations about what came next. My daughter was still breastfeeding. My son still wouldn't come near me. And I was unraveling. I went out one day, alone, to buy underwear and a cheap green dress for my daughter, the first piece of clothing I'd ever bought her with my own money. Until then, everything she wore had been second-hand or chosen by him. I remember standing in that aisle at Target, fingers trembling, staring at a rack of cotton panties for toddlers, and tearing up like I was buying a damn car. That's what freedom feels like when you've been without it. My brother helped me with everything. He gave me money, food, shelter, but emotionally, I was breaking. Because even though I was safe, even though I had left, I didn't feel ready. I'd spent years being told I couldn't make it without him, that I was too emotional, too weak, too broke, to everything. And part of me started to believe it. It's wild what abuse does to your mind. It doesn't just hurt, it rewrites the entire story of who you are. One afternoon, I got another call. This time from a woman at the church, not a leader, not someone with authority, just another sister in Christ. She said, "Look, I believe you, but you know how the church works. They're not going to stand by you unless he cheats or walks out. What are you going to do?" What was I going to do? I didn't have a home, no job, no car. My son hated me. My daughter was glued to me. I had no real income, no savings, and no clue what came next, so I went back. I know, I hate saying that out loud, but I did. He promised everything would change, said he'd go to counseling, that we'd go to the store together, that I could pick out food, choose what the kids wore, even buy a shampoo of my own. For a few weeks, it was quiet. Not good, just less violent. I wanted so badly to believe, but little by little, it all came crashing back. You work too much. You think you're better than me. You got an education, and now you wanna act like a queen. I had a permanent job with the school district. I'd worked nearly 5 years to get there. One day, in a moment of pressure and fear, I quit. Just handed in my resignation. Told myself, I don't see any of that money anyway. What's the point? And with that, I became even more dependent, even more trapped. But somewhere, somehow, something had already begun to shift in me. I started calling my niece from a payphone down the street. She was in college, studying psychology. She was only a few years younger than me, but talking to her was like opening a window. She told me, "You have to go back to school. You have to get into therapy. You have to fight for your mind." So I did. I went to the community health clinic and asked to see a therapist. The woman they assigned to me was young, patient, and kind. I walked in hoping she'd fix my marriage. But by the end of the first session, I realized something. The marriage wasn't broken. I was. He mocked me, of course. Therapy, that's for crazy people. He even tried to cut my hair once because I'd mentioned wanting to go to a real salon. When I asked about waxing my legs, he insisted on doing it himself like I belonged to him. I was monitored constantly. If I talked to a neighbor, I had to explain the entire conversation when I got home. He'd stand across the street from my school, pretending to be on the phone while he watched me through the fence. But inside me, something new was growing. Quietly, slowly, like a seed under frozen ground. And then one day, I stopped asking permission. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a resume, a car, or even my own toothbrush some days. But I had a sewing kit, just a needle, some old thread, and a pair of dull scissors I kept hidden in the back of the kitchen drawer. One day, a neighbor knocked. Her son's pants had torn, and she needed someone to fix them fast. I hesitated, then nodded and I stitched them up that afternoon at the kitchen table, while my kids watched cartoons with the volume low so he wouldn't get annoyed. When she came back, she handed me $5 crumpled dollars. It felt like 1,000. That was the first time in years I had held money that was mine. After that, word spread slowly. Another neighbor needed a hem fixed, then a zipper replaced, then a dress taken in. And just like that, I became the lady who sews. Every job was small, $5 here, $10 there, but it was freedom. I'd stash the bills inside a box of powdered laundry detergent he never used. It became my secret bank, and with every dollar, I grew stronger. I started sneaking my kids out for small adventures, just us. We'd walk to the corner store and buy powdered mix to make ice cream at home. We'd eat it silently in the kitchen after he'd gone to bed, like we were criminals. I'd whisper, "Don't tell Daddy," and my daughter would giggle like it was a game. But it wasn't a game. It was survival. Slowly, I began to rebuild the bond with my son. We'd play board games, puzzles, combat. He started laughing again, looking me in the eyes again. He wasn't calling me mommy just yet, but I was getting closer. Then something even more unexpected happened. I made a friend, a woman down the street, with 3 little girls, invited us to go for a walk. I said yes. I didn't ask for permission. I just went. We didn't walk far, just around the block. But when I got home, I didn't get slapped. I didn't get interrogated. He wasn't even there. That gave me courage. I signed up for free group therapy at the same clinic where I'd started sessions. It was led by a volunteer social worker, a woman who'd escaped her own abusive marriage years earlier. We sat in a church basement every Thursday night, folding chairs in a circle, coffee in paper cups. There, I spoke out loud things I had never told anyone. I don't think I've smiled in 10 years. I don't remember what I like. I don't know who I am. And they didn't judge me. They nodded. That group and my nieces' weekly phone calls saved me because around that same time, he found a new way to crush me. He stopped hitting, but started ignoring. He'd come home, fry himself dinner steak, potatoes, grease everywhere and not even ask if I'd eaten. Wouldn't say hello, wouldn't look at me, just existed beside me, like I was a ghost. And somehow, that silence hurt more than the fists. I was no longer a woman, not even a wife. I was a vacuum cleaner, a dish sponge, a babysitter with no name. But I kept sewing, kept saving, kept watching the light inside me flicker back on. By the time I hit my 30s, I was rebuilding myself in pieces. The sewing jobs became steady. My bond with my son was healing, and I had applied quietly for a new job. My mother pulled some strings through a cousin who knew someone working with the state-funded school program. After months of waiting, I got the call. A full-time position, benefits, a real salary. I started in August. By October, I filed for divorce. Not a separation, not counseling. Divorce. Real, legal, final. When I told him, he didn't scream. He didn't hit me. He just laughed this dry, sarcastic sound like I'd told him I was moving to the moon. "You can leave," he said, "but I'm not going anywhere." And he meant it. The house, a crumbling duplex we got through a housing assistance program, was technically in both our names. He refused to move out. Each day he'd take a chair, a lamp, or a bag of clothes one item at a time. But he never actually left. He'd vanish for hours, then return like he still lived there, still slept there, still owned the place. Meanwhile, I was trying to rebuild some kind of normal. I was teaching again, full-time. My kids were finally eating dinner with me. The doors to our home stayed unlocked for family. My brothers and nieces would visit. We laughed again. I breathed again. But he hovered. Then one day, he walked in, unplugged the home phone, and tucked it under his arm. "I'm taking this," he said, like it was a book he'd forgotten. "Put it down," I told him. "The line is in my name." He smirked. "Then call the cops." So I did. I walked next door to the neighbor's house. Our phones still had cords back then, and dialed 911. When the police arrived, I told them what happened. The officer, an older man, tired eyes, lazy voice, just shrugged. "Mum, you two are still legally cohabiting, right?" "No," I said. "We're legally separated. I have the papers." He raised his hands. "Then take it up with the courts." Just like that, no help, no consequences, no protection. I called my lawyer. She explained what no one else had told me. Because we signed a mutual divorce, there was no court order forcing him to vacate the property unless he assaulted me or threatened my life. The police couldn't intervene, so I was divorced. But I wasn't free. He lingered for months, taking his sweet time to move out, borrowing my tools, raiding the fridge, mocking my independence like it was a child's game. "So now you're the woman of the house," he'd say. "Good luck with that." Then came the camera. Years earlier, his sister had given us a red Kodak, my favorite thing I ever owned. I used it to take photos of my kids dressed for church or curled up on the couch. It was mine. It was the one thing that made me feel like I had a story worth telling, and one day, it disappeared. He'd taken it, along with old photo albums, childhood clothes, my notebooks. Each time he visited, he'd rob me of something tiny, but sacred. That winter, I cracked. My mom looked me in the eyes and asked, "Where's your wedding ring?" I handed it to her, and she said nothing, just nodded, and slipped it into her purse. That weekend, he returned, hands in pockets, smug grin, and said, "Where's our ring?" "Gone," I said. "Same place you're headed." He didn't laugh this time, because he could feel it too. I wasn't scared anymore, and I wasn't his. It was January 4th. Cold, quiet, the kind of night where every sound echoes. He'd already taken half the furniture little by little, day by day. It was his way of controlling the pace of his departure, like the house was some stage he could exit on his own terms. That day, he showed up again, walked in like he still lived there. Only this time, he wasn't after furniture. He wanted the phone. Back then, having a landline wasn't just normal, it was necessary. Cell phones were for executives and rich people. The phone was my only way to talk to my mother, my niece, my therapist, my only way to call for help if something went wrong. He walked in, yanked the phone cord out of the wall, tucked the handset under his arm like it was a basketball, and headed for the door. I stood there frozen. "You're not taking that." He laughed. "It's just a phone." "No, it's my line. It's staying." "Call your lawyer," he said, slamming the door behind him, so I did. My lawyer confirmed what I already feared. Without a court order, I had no way to force him out or stop him from taking whatever he wanted. But that night, everything changed. I called my brothers. They showed up 30 minutes later, two of them, both furious, both tired of watching me get stripped of everything I owned. We drove to his mother's house, where he was staying now. He was home, sitting on the porch like nothing was wrong. One brother went inside to talk. The other stayed in the car with me, gripping the steering wheel like it was his last thread of patience. Eventually, they got the phone back, but that wasn't enough. Back at my house, my brothers went to the hardware store. They bought for new padlocks and changed every lock in the house front door, back door, even the window latches. That was the last time he ever slept in my home. But of course, he tried one last thing. That night, he came back, drunk, angry, banging on the gate, yelling, trying to force his way in. I didn't open the door. I didn't even flinch. He screamed into the night, "This is my house." But it wasn't anymore. It was mine from that night on. Things moved fast. My birthday was the following Sunday, and for the first time in a decade, I had a party. My family came. My kids ran barefoot through the house, laughing, their voices bouncing off the walls like music. No secrets, no screaming, no man towering over me, telling me what I could or couldn't do, just cake, music, and people who loved me. I was teaching again. I was sewing on the side. I was smiling without asking permission. It didn't matter that we lived in a government-issued duplex, with peeling paint and paper-thin walls. It didn't matter that my old car barely started. On cold mornings, I had peace, and peace is worth more than diamonds. I kept working, kept pushing, kept choosing myself. Months later, I finally managed to sell that old house. He tried to block the sale, told the real estate agents it wasn't on the market. But I kept fighting, kept showing up, kept telling the truth. Eventually, we closed the deal. He took his cut in cash. I took mine in the form of a tiny apartment with one working faucet, a faulty heater, and no man inside. And you know what? It felt like a palace. I had survived. I was living in my own apartment, working as a full-time teacher, and raising my kids on my terms. My ex was gone physically, legally, and spiritually. For the first time in over a decade, there were no bruises to hide, no lies to rehearse, no footsteps in the hallway that made my blood run cold. But freedom has a strange echo when you've lived so long in silence. I thought I would feel whole the moment he left. I didn't. I still cried at night, still woke up afraid, still questioned if I was enough, so I went back to therapy. This time, for me. I found a private counselor, someone I could finally afford. Now that I was earning my own money, I paid the light bill, the rent, and my healing. That was my new rhythm. And slowly, something beautiful began to bloom. I started walking differently, laughing differently, even eating differently. I made pancakes for dinner, bought powdered donuts, just because I liked them. My kids called it freedom food. We'd sit on the floor, legs crossed, watching reruns with sticky fingers and no shame. I also got my driver's license. A 3.5, a lifetime dream that used to feel laughable now felt possible. I bought my first car, a rusty old Volkswagen Beetle, pale blue, full of dents and life. I packed my kids in the back, loaded bags of clothes I'd sewn for family, and drove to my mother's house. No begging for rides, no waiting on bus benches, no man needed. I was finally mobile, and I didn't stop. We went to the beach, we flew on a plane, me and my babies. Soaring 30,000 feet over a world I never thought I'd see. I found old friends, laughed over coffee, started saying yes again to invitations, to experiences, to myself. For years, I didn't even think about dating. I was too busy falling in love with someone else, me. But life had one more twist. During a home repair project, I met someone, a man, kind and gentle. At first, I ignored the signs. I didn't want love. I didn't trust it. But he showed up, slowly, respectfully, patiently. He didn't try to fix me. He just listened. I married him not because I needed saving, but because I was already whole. We were married for 7 years. It wasn't perfect, no marriage is, but it was real, honest. And when it ended, I didn't fall apart. I didn't panic. I didn't disappear. I signed the papers, wished him well, and walked away with my name, my strength, and my light intact. Because this time, I wasn't a woman searching for herself inside someone else's shadow. I was me now. At 60, I wake up every morning with joy. I take photos as a hobby. I eat what I love. I walk where I want. I wear bright lipstick and laugh loudly in public. I go to the theater, the park, the museum. I say no without guilt and yes without fear. And most of all, I tell my story because someone, somewhere, needs to hear that there's life after abuse, there's light after darkness, and there's a woman inside you, strong, beautiful, unstoppable, just waiting to rise. If you made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. I don't share it for pity, I share it because I survived. If you're going through something similar, please know you are not alone. There is help, there is hope, and there is a life waiting for you that's bigger than your fear. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. And if you need support, check the description. We've got resources and a private community just for women like you. You are stronger than you think, and your story isn't over, it's just beginning.